Howard fished a Sharpie out of the junk drawer and shuffled to the calendar hanging on the fridge. He uncapped the marker with his teeth, and it squeaked as he crossed out the box for the previous day with the dark black X. He put his finger on the calendar and counted down the days out loud.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9 days until Wendy, Peter, and the kids flew into Buffalo from California. 9 days felt like a lifetime away, but it was a short time compared to the 2.5 years he'd gone without seeing them over the pandemic. He wondered precisely how many days it'd been. Howard tried to do the math in his head, but when he tried to multiply 365 times 2, the numbers got jumbled and foggy. He put the cap back on the Sharpie and returned it to the junk drawer. 9 days. He could get through 9 days, easy. He'd just have to keep himself busy and try not to look at the clock. Howard dozed on his recliner as golf played on mute on the television. The mail slots in the front door squeaked, opened, and closed, and snapped him awake. Howard wiggled himself out of the recliner. His back was tight and his knees were sore. He felt every one of his 78 years cracking and popping as he stood up and headed to the front door. He unlocked the deadbolt and stepped outside. The mail carrier was already down the driveway and headed next door.
Laura!
Howard called out. She didn't turn around.
Hey, Laura!
He called, waving his arms. The mail carrier stopped and faced him. She took an earbud out of her left ear and it dangled on her collarbone. She was in her late 40s with specks of gray in her sandy brown hair. Her face was tan and wrinkled from the sun.
Hi there, Howard. How are we doing today?
Just fine. Great weather we've had this week.
Laura looked up at the sky and smiled.
Yep.
She called back. A moment of silence hung between them. The phone rang inside, but Howard ignored it.
Wendy and the grandkids are just 9 days away.
Laura raised her eyebrow.
9 days away from what?
What?
I said 9 days away from what?
Oh, from visiting. They're coming in from California and staying with me for a whole week.
Howard was beaming.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's great, Howard.
Can you believe it's been 2 years?
Laura cocked her head. She held her hand over her eyebrows to block out the sun.
2 years since what?
Since I've seen them. More than 2 years, actually. Patrick is 5 now, and Josie is 7. Time flies. But they've got their shots, safe and sound.
The phone stopped ringing inside.
That's great, Howard. That should be fun.
Laura paused. Howard leaned against the railing on the front porch and smiled.
Yep, almost 2.5 years. I think we're really starting to turn the corner here, but...
Howard, so sorry, but I've got a long way to go. I better get a move on.
Howard smiled and waved.
Of course! Shake a leg. Hey, same time tomorrow.
Yeah, sure thing, Howard. Have a nice day.
Laura turned and put her earbud back in. She headed down the sidewalk. Howard looked up at the sky as the sun disappeared behind the clouds. He turned and walked back into the house. He went into the kitchen for a glass of water, and the light on his answering machine was blinking. He hit play as he filled his glass at the sink.
Hi, Daddy. It's Wendy. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm in the middle of shooting a commercial, and the talent just tested positive along with some of the crew. We gotta put everything on hold, and we're picking back up next week. I'm negative, so I guess that's the silver lining. I'm sorry, Dad, but we'll need to push the trip with Peter and the kids back 10 days. I'm so sorry. It stinks. But we're still coming. We'll have to find a coffee shop or something so Peter can work remotely while we're there, so we'll need to figure out some logistics, but... well, we'll figure it out when we get there. Let's not worry about that right now. Anyway, I already called Delta and we're all set. We'll just be a little later than we thought. Okay, all right, I'm coming. I'm actually about to hop in the car, so let's try and catch up later this week. Love you. I can't wait to see you.
The water overflowed and spilled down Howard's hand. He turned off the faucet and wiped his hand off on his jeans. Howard pulled out a chair and stared out the kitchen window. The sun was behind the clouds. He held his glass with both hands but didn't take a drink. The clock above the fridge ticked away. Howard crossed off another day and stared at the calendar. His bed was beckoning him to come back to sleep, but instead he stretched, patted his belly, and made himself a cup of coffee. He could feel a dark mood creeping up on him, and he tried to shake it away. Howard needed some company. Anyway, just someone to talk to. He'd treat someone to lunch, no matter how long it'd been since they last saw each other. He picked up his coffee, walked into the living room, opened up his roll-top desk, and took out his old address book. He carried it back into the kitchen and sat down. He opened the address book and started to go through names. The further he got through the small leather-bound book, the more depressed he felt. Anthony Coraluzzo, his old golfing partner at Grover Cleveland, died in 2018, heart attack, only 58. Ed Donovan moved to Syracuse and lives with his son and his husband. Michael Flynn, his old buddy from Canisius High School, died of COVID in the early days. Joe Lapone, he and his wife retired to Hilton Head. Luke Kovach, Alzheimer's, in a home somewhere if he's still alive. Terry Noonan, COVID. George and Leah Snyder, they used to play doubles together before Betsy passed away. Retired to Florida. James and Mark Talbot, Florida. Bruce Zanowick, gone 13 years. Howard closed the address book, feeling more lousy than before. He put it back in his desk and returned to the kitchen. He stared out the window until his coffee went cold. Howard tried to plan out the rest of the day, but no longer felt like leaving the house. He got up, went to the phone, and dialed Wendy's number. It rang until it went to voicemail.
Hi, you've reached Wendy's phone. I'm not here right now, but if you leave a message, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.
The tone beeped.
Hi, Wendy, it's Dad. Just saying hi and that I got your message. It's sad we have to postpone, but it's all for the best. Say hello to Peter and tell the kids Grandpa says hi. I miss you, honey. Call back if you can, but I know you're busy, so we'll catch up soon. And stay healthy. Love you, bye.
Howard hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, staring at the receiver, then picked it back up off the cradle. He took a deep breath, then dialed the phone number of the first house he lived in with Betsy after they got married. It rang twice until a man picked up on the other end.
Hello?
Hi, may I speak with Betsy?
Who?
Betsy Mahoney.
Sorry, you've got the wrong number.
The man hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Howard listened to the dial tone, feeling foolish and lonely, when the mail slot opened and closed. He went to the front door and opened it, expecting to say hello to Laura. Instead, another mail carrier was halfway down the driveway.
Hey there!
Howard yelled. The man stopped and turned around. He stood at 5'9", and his skinny arms were covered in tattoos. He cupped his hand over his eyebrows to block out the sun. Yeah? The man called back. He scrunched his forehead and ran his tongue over his teeth, impatient.
Ha! Is Laura on vacation?
The man dropped his hand from his forehead.
Yeah, man. She's on vacation for good. Yesterday was her last day.
Howard's heart sank.
What?
The man cocked his head.
Are you Howard?
Howard grinned.
That's me.
The man smiled with the corner of his mouth.
Laura warned me about you. Chatty Cathy, huh?
Howard's face flushed with embarrassment.
Laura and I are friends.
Oh, sure.
The man laughed.
Whenever she'd get back late, we'd ask how long you kept her, and she'd just shake her head. We called it getting the Howard treatment.
He felt like he was going to cry.
Look, man, they don't pay me overtime. I just want to drop off the mail and go home, okay?
Howard bit his lower lip.
Yeah, okay. Have a good day.
The man turned away and headed down the sidewalk.
Adios,
he called over his shoulder. Howard watched him for a moment, then went back inside. He locked the deadbolt and collapsed into his recliner, humiliated. He prayed for the phone to ring, but it was silent. The next night, Howard turned on the dishwasher, put on an old Buffalo Bison's baseball cap, and headed out the door. After feeling lousy the day before and most of the afternoon, he made up his mind that he had to get out of the house and be around people face to face. He walked down Hurdle Avenue with his chest out and his head high. His chest felt miserable and heavy, but he put on a brave face and smiled at strangers on the sidewalk. Few smiled back. Most kept their eyes to the ground. Howard went into a bar that looked inviting enough, and it took his eyes a moment to adjust to the dark. There were no TVs and sleepy music quietly played. A man and a woman sat together in a corner looking at their phones. Howard approached the bar and took a seat. A tall bartender with black, slicked-back hair tossed a coaster onto the bar in front of Howard and leaned forward. He nodded his head and raised his eyebrows.
Hi there. How are we doing tonight?
Asked Howard. The bartender smiled without his eyes and nodded.
Let's see. I'd like a bottle of Molson.
No bottles, only draft, the bartender said robotically.
Oh, what do we have on draft?
The bartender pulled a laminated paper out from under the bar and put it in front of Howard, then leaned his back against the rail and started texting. Howard read through the menu. He'd never heard of any of the beers that were listed. He picked the one with the lowest alcohol percentage and motioned for the bartender, who came over. He pointed at the menu.
I'll have this one. I don't know how to pronounce it.
The bartender nodded, poured the beer, and put it in front of Howard.
Thank you.
The bartender nodded and took out his phone.
What's your name? I'm Howard.
Rick, he said without looking up.
How long's this place been here, Rick?
2019.
Wow. So you guys survived the pandemic. Good for you.
Yep. Rick walked to the other end of the bar, nor did he look up from his phone. Howard held his beer with both hands. He didn't feel much like drinking. Young people started coming into the bar in a steady stream. Howard smiled and nodded at them, and they politely smiled back. No words were exchanged. 2 empty bar stools sat on either side of him. No one pulled up a seat next to him. Howard took off his hat and stared at his reflection in the bar mirror. His blonde-white hair was matted down from his baseball cap. He'd worn it too tightly, and there was a red mark across his forehead. His polo shirt was buttoned to the top, and it was too big on his skinny frame. It certainly wasn't flattering. He smiled at himself, but his face looked tired. He felt embarrassed and looked away. He dropped his eyes and stared into his half-finished glass of beer. He pushed it away from him and motioned for Rick to come over. Rick saw him, but took his time serving other customers before coming over. He raised his eyebrows again and asked Howard what he needed.
What's the damage?
7.
Wow. $7 for a beer. Holy moly.
Howard laughed. He took out his wallet, pulled out a 10, and put it on the table. Rick looked at the 10 and shook his head. We're contactless here. We only accept card. Howard looked at him in disbelief.
You don't accept money?
Only card. Says so on the menu.
I must have missed it.
Rick shut his eyes and clenched his jaw. You don't have a card?
No. It's at home. I didn't think I'd need it to get a beer.
Well, you do. Howard put his hands out with his palms in the air in disbelief.
What do you want me to do? You won't accept money?
Rick rolled his eyes. Look, man, I'll put it on the house. Next time, bring a card. Howard shook his head, flabbergasted.
I've never heard of a place not taking money.
Well, now you have. Rick turned away and helped another customer. Howard sat in the chair for a moment in disbelief. He put the 10 on the bar, put on his baseball cap, and walked outside. He looked both ways. Hurdle was busy with young people on a night out. They streamed around him in a steady flow. He debated trying out another bar and finding someone to chat with, but he just wanted to go home. He stood on the sidewalk figuring out his next move. An ambulance whined in the distance. It approached closer and closer until it passed him, its sirens screaming, splitting through Howard's head. He plugged his ears and squeezed his eyes shut. He just wanted to go home. That night, Howard took out the yellow pages and found the number for Delta Airlines. He grabbed the phone from its cradle and carefully plugged in the numbers. Cheesy music played before a robotic voice chimed in.
Thank you for calling Delta Airlines. Please state why you are calling.
I'd like to buy a ticket for California. I'd like to leave tomorrow.
I'm having trouble understanding. Please restate how we can help you.
I want to visit my daughter in California. Any time works. I just want to see her.
I'm still having trouble understanding. Please stay on the line while I connect you to the next available service representative.
The cheesy music played again when the robotic voice came back on.
Thank you for calling Delta Airlines. Due to a high call volume, all our representatives are busy. The current wait is 2 hours. Would you like to hold?
Yes, I'll hold.
Thank you for choosing Delta Airlines. A representative will be with you as soon as one is available.
Howard sat at the kitchen table and listened to the elevator music playing on the other line. He waited and waited. He would nod off to sleep, but snapped awake before he fell into dreams. An hour passed, then 2. 2.5 hours later, a male voice picked up on the other end.
Hi, this is Delta Airlines. Thank you for waiting. My name is Greg. How may I assist you today?
Hi, good evening. My name is Howard Mahoney. I'd like to buy a ticket to California.
Okay, Mr. Mahoney. I understand you'd like to buy a ticket to California. Is that correct?
Yes,
Thank you. Where in California?
Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Will you be flying into LAX?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahoney. What is the departure airport?
Buffalo. I'm flying out of Buffalo, Niagara Airport. Anytime works. I'm an early riser.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Okay, let's see here. The first available flight departs at 11:20 a.m. tomorrow.
Howard smiled.
Wow, that works just fine.
Thank you. Can I have your credit card number?
Sure thing. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna set the phone down while I get it from my desk. Is that okay?
That's okay, Mr. Mahoney. I'll hold.
Howard went to the roll-top desk and fished out his credit card. He returned to the phone.
Okay, I've got it right here. Are you ready?
Yes, Mr. Mahoney.
Alrighty. It's 6011 8701 4464 3137.
Just a moment, Mr. Mahoney.
There was a pause on the other end.
Is that a Discover card, Mr. Mahoney?
It is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney, but we don't accept Discover. We accept American Express, Visa, and MasterCard. You got one of them?
Howard's heart sank.
But it's all I have.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney.
Can't I pay at the gate in cash or check?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney. That policy is no longer in effect. Do you have another card?
No! I said this is all I have!
Said Howard, getting angry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney. I can't complete your transaction. Is there anything else I can help you with today?
Please, sir. I just want to see my daughter. Is there anything you can do?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney. I cannot complete your transaction. Can I help you with anything else today?
No. That's fine.
Well, thank you for calling Delta Airlines. We'd appreciate your feedback. Please stay on the line after the tone to rate your service today, and if you...
Howard hung up. He fingered through the yellow pages to find another airline, but was too frustrated to go through the whole ordeal again. He closed the phone book, put it back in the drawer, and sat at the kitchen table. He stared out the window over the sink. A sliver of moon shone brightly and then was covered by clouds. He got up from the table with his shoulders slumped and went to bed without brushing his teeth. Howard woke up early but laid in bed and drifted in and out of sleep. He looked at the clock. It was 12:01 p.m. He rolled on his back and shut his eyes when the phone rang. He laid on his side and put a pillow over his ears. When he woke up, it was 3:20 p.m. He forced himself out of bed, brushed his teeth, and went into the kitchen. His answering machine was blinking. He hit play, then went to the cupboard to pull out a bag of coffee. Wendy's voice played on the tape.
Hi, Daddy. It's Wendy. Well, it finally happened. Patrick and I tested positive this morning. We both have a tiny fever, but otherwise we're feeling okay. Perfect timing, right? We'll need to quarantine for 10 days, so we'll need to push back the visit. I'm so sorry, Dad. But don't worry, we got flight insurance, so we are coming.
Howard clicked stop on the answering machine, rewound it, and erased the message. He sat at the kitchen table. A heavy weight rose from his stomach, traveled up his chest, and formed a knot in his throat. His eyes burned, and he burst into tears. He cried with his entire body, his shoulders heaving, and he covered his face with his palms. He laid his head on the table and folded his hands across the back of his head. The mail slot swung open, and clanged shut. Howard pushed his chair back, headed into the bedroom, and got back under the covers. Tears trickled down his face and soaked through the pillowcase. He wished he had a single friend in the world to call.